All right, everybody, it's JC and JB with FFL Consultants. Welcome to our FFLC community. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it. We still got people popping in, but that's all right. We are going to get started on time because we have a lot to cover. The next 20 minutes is definitely essential to all of you FFLs out there. We're going to cover a number of different rulings that are going on, as well as some of the things that we're starting to see. We had 5 more revocations handed to us yesterday, Thursday and Friday, rather, contacted by a few FFLs. This week's Ask Us Anything is brought to you by Davidson's. Davidson's has been a wholesale distributor since 1932, and today is one of the country's largest wholesale distributors of the firearms industry. They have a rock-solid reputation in the industry, and nothing beats that Davidson's guaranteed lifetime replacement. Check them out at davidsonsinc.com. All right, on today's Ask Us Anything, we're going to cover ATF stats as usual, catch you up on that. There were some amendments that occurred, so that's pretty interesting to us. We got a number of updates from rulings to the NICS Denial Act. We got a couple of great stories to share with you, an update on revocations, our strategies, and our all-new term you heard it here first, GIRFT, and we'll get to that in a minute. Hey, look, good old illustrious President Corn Pop's been in office for 241 days. The zero tolerance policy has been in effect for 431 days, and we have 875 more days until President Corn Pop is out of office. So let's make the best of it. JB, how you doing, brother?
Doing good. Hello, everybody. JC is on a roll here, so we're going to let him keep going. Thank you for joining us. Again, we have more people popping in. I want to remind everyone, if you have questions that you didn't already send in to be asked and reviewed at the end of the session, please use that chat box. And if there's something critical, you can always go ahead and hit that space bar to activate your microphone. But use the chat box if you have questions you want us to answer at the end of the session. So again, thanks for joining us, everyone.
All right, we got some breaking news, fresh and new this morning. UPS has updated its policy on how to ship firearms. Real concerning here, they've pretty much followed steps with FedEx. So firearms must be identified and bear a serial number. So what does that mean? That means your 80%ers, your PMFs, those are going to be required to be marked if you're going to be shipping them. So just be aware of that. We'll get into what they call a firearm product in a moment, but handguns, if you're going to ship through UPS, number one, you have to have a shipper's agreement in place with them. Just be aware of that. Handguns are going to be required to go next day, and that's any one of their next day air services. That's early, next day air, and next day air saver. Firearm products are no longer accepted for shipment at UPS customer centers. I underlined firearm products for a minute. Here, we'll get into that, but they may only be shipped through a UPS scheduled pickup account using various UPS pickup services. Just be aware of that. You need to have that shipper agreement in place, and they're going to come to your place of business to pick those up. For those of you that do a lot of shipping, that may be a worthwhile endeavor, but for those of you that only ship here and there, just be aware that there is a fee associated with that on-site pickup by a UPS driver. So firearm products, UPS has defined firearm products as firearms and firearm parts that do not constitute firearms. So just be aware of that. Whatever you're shipping, you better have that agreement in place. So just be aware. All right, the stats, JB, you taking this one?
Yeah, let me get into the numbers here, guys, real fast. And as we bring to you every month, we've been keeping these running since January. So last month, July, we had 671 ATF inspections out there. Looking at your screen, there's the big cities, there's the offices who have their teams out and about and inspecting on a daily basis, like crazy. They're like ants in summer. They're just everywhere. Warning conferences, we had 16, actually 15 in July, 6 more than last month. So that's something to worry about. They're not getting less, they're getting more, and they're getting a little more intense on their violations. We're telling everyone who calls us, every violation must be considered a big violation, because depending on your inspector, they may cite you. For the most part, they will cite you. We're not finding any leniency on inspections, and we just want to keep you out of that warning status. Remember, if you get into warning status, off an inspection, the ATF will schedule you for a return visit, a reinspection within 12 to 15 months. So definitely be alert to that. And then revocations in July, there was 16 completed revocations. Doesn't sound like a big number, but as JC will get into further, a revocation takes many months to complete. So we know many hundreds of letters was sent out. Notice of revocations was sent out back in April. We heard about it first at the FIC conference in Atlanta. And since then, we are getting calls daily, literally daily. We have, unfortunately, FFLs calling, asking for help, support, and what to do next because they got a notice of revocation. So there's those big cities. It's the same cities we've been seeing over and over. The focus is intense in Chicago, Charlotte, Columbus. Now Denver's popping up, more intensity in the mountain region, Rocky Mountain region, Kansas City, Boston, Phoenix, and even New York had one this month. So watch your inspections. Total inspections for the year so far at 5,300. Just to note, last year, all of 2020, 2021 rather, we had 5,800 inspections. So at this rate, we will definitely be hitting that 10 or 12,000 mark as far as inspections go this year. Call it double. Very intense focus by the ATF, as we've been talking about. If you're in any of those cities and you haven't been inspected yet, you will be soon because these teams are not slowing down. Warning conferences, 112 completed in July, year to date. Again, these are completed, not in process. In process takes a while. Even on a warning conference, there's appeals, there's delays, there's scheduling of hearings and meetings. And revocations, looking at that number 67 for the year. Again, these are completed. These are where folks have either surrendered, gave up quickly, or called their attorneys or called us or another partner and are dragging it out as long as possible, utilizing every aspect of the legal process that we can to request informal hearings, ask for discovery, ask for evidence, ask for witnesses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the process, and that's the strategy, is not to just surrender your license if you get a notice of revocation, but to ask for help. And again, here's the big number. This is what we're worried about. These are the notices and/or actually notices of revocations that we have either heard about, been told about, or have obtained through other partnering and Second Amendment resources. The ATF is not publicizing how many actual notice of revocations they haven't issued. Again, this is an ongoing practice based on your current inspections. The big lump was way back when they rescinded warnings from last year and issued revocations. We heard about that a few months ago, but now they trickle in daily, whether it be 2 or 3 or 5 that we hear about. It's still happening across the country. All right.
All right, we're going to get into 2021R-05F, which is in full effect as of 8/24. Those changes that were outlined in the ATF ruling are now requirements by regulation. So let's make sure that you guys are 100%. If you're electronic on your A&D records, you will need to make sure your provider is up to date and knows what they're supposed to be doing as far as those column headings and such. So number one, we know that the ATF ruling redefined what a firearm, frame, and receiver. A lot of this stems from those 80%ers or privately made firearms, so be aware of that. The requirements for PMFs or privately made firearms are quite simple. This only applies to licensees. PMFs are not illegal. By regulation, licensees have some requirements to meet if and when they come in contact with a PMF. That means that if somebody brings in a PMF for gunsmithing, you can do things the same day, but if you keep it overnight, you will be required as a licensee to mark that firearm. And that marking requirement's real simple. It's the RDS key of your FFL. That's the first 3 and last 5 divided by a hyphen and a unique serial number that you must issue. And then obviously add your city and state as well. No, you do not need to be a manufacturer to mark that PMF. And again, keep in mind, if you don't keep it overnight, you do not have a requirement to mark it. All right, so we've given you a sample there of a FFL number and the serial number. That's exactly how it's supposed to look. And then obviously add your city and state. And if you can't do this and you have somebody else locally, an FFL or otherwise, even if it's not a licensee, you can have them mark it as long as you are with that device. So you have to remain with it. You can't leave it overnight. Otherwise, that turns them into a licensee. And if they're not licensed, you'll be in violation, and so will they. Some record keeping requirements. I just mentioned this. Those A and D record headings, which we'll show you on the next couple slides. You need to make sure that your A and D record or bound book is up to date with the correct headings. Record retention changes. There are some record retention changes as it relates to 2021R-05F. No longer can you dispose of or destroy records older than 20 years. You must keep all records for the entirety of your license. So obviously reach out to us about some strategies with that, but you are now also, if you have a lot of records, authorized to use offsite record storage without a variance. Just keep in mind that if you do use offsite storage to store any old records, it is subject to ATF inspection. So just be aware of that. Let's make sure you're in compliance. You got to be 100% with this. Otherwise, you will be cited for a violation. All right. A couple slides here to show you as far as the dealer. These are the changes for the dealer A&D record. Pretty simple. You just to that manufacturer and importer, if any column, you need to add or privately made firearm in quotes, PMF in parentheses. All right. So if you have enough room, you can write that in. But just be aware that this is a requirement for dealers now. Okay.
Yeah,
The
JC,
next, go ahead.
Yeah, that's pawnbrokers too. Anyone using a paper bound book A&D system. And JC, how about software?
Yeah, get with your software providers and make sure that they have some sort of update for this. It's going to be relevant to anyone that's a type 1, type 2, specifically, including gunsmiths. So you want to make sure. Look, when it comes to PMFs, our #1 recommendation is it's all well and good that an individual has the right to manufacture a firearm. By law, he's good to go. No regulations there. As far as you're concerned, from a dealer perspective, the risk and liability with this, our recommendation is just stay away from them. #1, you got to mark them. #2, you have no guarantees about the quality of workmanship with that firearm, whether or not it operates properly, whether or not it's going to blow up in somebody's hands. So why take the risks? Just stay away from them, but just be aware that you do need to update your A&D records to cover the regulation changes. Next slide. All right, importers, manufacturers. Just be aware that you have additional changes that need to be made to your A&D records. And those changes are really simple. Again, add that privately made firearm PMF to that first column and add the additional language if privately made in the US. In addition, you need to have a column addition for country or countries of manufacturer if imported. So just make sure that that column is added as well. Again, for those of you using electronic bound books, please make sure that your provider is getting this stuff updated ASAP.
JC, a quick question. We had a question earlier on the 05F. Does this change anything for manufacturers with consolidating their bound books?
Oh, absolutely. Manufacturers and importers, you are now required to consolidate all of your records. No more keeping records for separate items. Everything must be consolidated into one bound book, whether it be paper or e-bound. So just keep aware of that. Again, make sure your provider is getting that updated in their systems. Unusual firearm acquisition. Now, this applies to both dealers and manufacturers. So a couple different things here. For the dealers, if you acquire a firearm that has multiple manufacturers listed or multiple serial numbers listed, they did not adopt the original serial number for whatever reason, you need to ensure that you are recording this information in your acquisition and disposition record. It'll just simply be one manufacturer / the second manufacturer, and then one serial number / the second serial number. You need to make sure you're keeping track of that as a dealer, gunsmith, pawnbroker. For you manufacturers and importers, if say for whatever reason you come in contact or you are remanufacturing a firearm and you have to mark it, we advise to try to adopt that serial number as long as it's unique. But if you can't, again, you are going to have to mark. And the way you do it is you take that original serial number and you have it marked with a slash, and then whatever that new serial number you're adding to that firearm, you need to make sure it is on the frame or receiver. That is also part of the new ruling. In addition, if you are remanufacturing, you will need to add your manufacturer information. Again, I would just recommend making it easy and putting that slash after the original manufacturer if possible, and putting your manufacturer information on there as well. So just keep that in mind.
Hey, a lot of questions on this, but please just use that chat room, get your question typed in there. Don't worry about spelling and punctuation. We will get to these at the end of the presentation to get to all your questions.
Yep. All right. ATF ruling 2021R-08. This is on the stabilizing brace. Originally, we had heard that it was going to come out in October, or at least a few months ago, we had heard it was going to be produced in October. Now it's being pushed out to December. The one thing we do know is that the factoring criteria worksheet is out. They will not be using that, which is very interesting. So we'll see what they come up with, but not really anything new to report on 08. So just be in mind, keep it in mind. We're getting a lot of questions about 08 from pawnbrokers and dealers, specifically on whether or not you can buy a firearm, buy that used firearm back, or if you can do a loan on it or offer a pawn on it or whatnot. Yes, right now you can. So no need to worry about it until December. We will obviously keep you up to date on that, and we'll see what happens.
And even if they do approve it, JC, in December, don't we have 90 days?
Yeah, if they republish this in the Federal Register, we will know about it 90 days in advance. So just, like I said, just stand by. We'll let you know as soon as we know more. And trust us, we are one of the first to hear about these things. So we will definitely let you know. All right, to add further insult to injury, we've got a new ATF ruling that came out August 17th of 2022. It is ATF ruling 2022-1. The good news is I'm putting together a presentation for this week. I went out to the ATF website and it had disappeared. It was there and then it was gone. And I was like, WTF, what's going on here? And then lo and behold, it pops back up again. So it's back out there. It speaks specifically to the retention of Form 4473s pursuant to that old ATF ruling 2016-2. It also changes a little bit about 2021-05F as it relates to the electronic storage of paper 4473s. In 05F, they talked about you could scan old 4473s, anything older than 20 years. Well, with 2022-1, they have now reduced that to anything more than 3 years old. Here's what I'll tell you about that. You need to make sure that you are capturing all 6 copies or 6 pages if you decide to go down this path for any 4473s in paper format that are older than 3 years old. You need to make sure it's organized. You need to make sure that you have some sort of protections in place to avoid losing any of those Form 4473s. One of our recommendations is if you do go down this path, you organize your filing system by last name, first name, and date. That means when you scan them, you name those PDF copies with the last name, the first name, and the date of the transaction. So just keep that in mind. One other item of note, no longer is a variance required for going electronic, but notification is. Previous to this ruling, you had to go for a variance in order to transition to electronic. No longer required, but notification is, and that notification needs to go to your local ATF field division, and they'll just essentially make sure you understand all of the requirements of 2016-2, and you're just knowledgeable of the fact that you need to keep multiple copies, archive, backup, etc. So just keep that in mind if you do decide to transition to electronic.
And JC, that notification is 60 days, am I right?
That notification is 60 days prior to transitioning to electronic. So you need to give them a heads up well in advance. All right.
Yeah, one question on this, JC. So this does not affect the variance requirements for 2016-1 for A&D electronic storage?
Yes, 2016-1 refers to A&D electronic storage.
Yes.
So obviously that has to be, you have to do it. Any e-bound books have to be in compliance with that. But there are some additions, there are some nuances as a result of 2021-05F.
I guess the question is, do we still need a variance for electronic A&D? Because this thing.
No, an electronic A&D, you no longer need to have a variance for that, and no notification is required. You just need to make sure that if you transition to electronic bound books, that everything goes electronic. That means even your gunsmithing log, that needs to be electronic too. So all your bound books, if one goes electronic, all go electronic.
Right. Very good.
All right. NICS Denial Notification Act. God, we've gotten tons of questions on this. Just so you are aware, this goes into effect on October 1st of 2022. I think it's actually at the end of September, but you know, there's some tweaks and things that need to occur. This only applies to NICS states. That means if you do background checks through the NICS background check system, this is only referring to you right now. Okay. Now there are a number of point of contact states that already do this. So no changes for you all, unless you're a point of contact state that doesn't. Expect that it will probably occur in your state at some point as well. This requires local law enforcement to be notified by NICS, not you. You as the FFL have nothing to do with this other than what you're already supposed to be doing. You are not the one that's going to be required to notify law enforcement. All right. This is going to be handed down from NICS. Local law enforcement will determine whether or not to investigate. Now, I've already been in contact with a lot of my law enforcement friends and colleagues, and I'll tell you right now, there's a few laughs going on. Obviously, in the more crime-riddled states and cities, not the case, but I will tell you, the caseloads out there, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens here. Just be aware you may be contacted by local law enforcement, and hey, just make sure you get a copy of that original 4473 to give to them. And just be prepared. Know that if you get it denied, you could be contacted by your local law enforcement agency. It's a little bit of a change. That's not something that's the norm in the firearms industry. So just don't be surprised when it happens. One thing we want to call out, and I'll talk to the NICS numbers in a second, but educate your customers about the appeal process. If you get a customer that's been denied, please educate them on the appeal process. Provide them the documentation to do that appeal. I can't tell you how many FFLs that we go into, somebody gets denied right in front of us, and all the FFL does is say, oh, you've been denied, sorry. And the customer walks out the door. Well, let's get into some numbers in a second, but educate them, give them the information they need to appeal that. Now, obviously, if somebody knows why they were denied, then they're just going to walk out the door. They're not going to bother with the appeal process. So, and then always remember, as FFLs, complete your denials. On our mock inspections, we see it all the time where people don't complete the printed name and signature at the end. You don't date it, but you just want to make sure 34 and 35 are completed, and you keep those for 5 years. All right. Those are required to be maintained for 5 years. That's anything with an NTN number where the firearm was not transferred. That means your NICS denials. That means your dealer canceled with NTNs. Make sure you're maintaining those for 5 years. You need to keep evidence of those transactions. Next slide, NICS numbers.
Real quick, JC, on this, we don't have, but we will have the instructions on this process and procedure once it's issued by FBI NICS 2 public, and obviously we'll get that to you guys quickly. But we don't have they don't have the instructions yet. It's not published, so we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We do not know exactly what type of information will be communicated to your local law enforcement. Our guess right now, as we understand it, is that they'll receive some type of document that will provide them privilege to come in and ask for a copy of a 4473. in no way is it allowing local law enforcement to come in and do anything new versus what the ATF has restricted them from doing prior. They don't have full access to your records. We want to make sure you're only giving a copy of a 4473 to someone. The original always stays with you as the custodian of records. So as we get more, we will definitely share with you, but this is definitely coming.
Yep, absolutely. So just to give you a little bit of insight on that appeal process and how important this is. So in 2021, NICS transactions, 411.6 million background checks. Of those 411.6 million, 154,000 denials occurred, only 0.04%, 0.4 of a percentage point. 24,000 people actually filed appeals. That's 24,000 of that 154,000 denials. It's only 16%. I mean, that's crazy, right? And then of that, about 5% of them actually get overturned. So 7,000 people went through the appeal process and it was overturned. And it could be overturned for any number of reasons. Fingerprints don't match the person that was denied. The records are incomplete, whatever the case may be. That's why it's so vitally important for you to educate your customer on that appeal process. Somewhere in the neighborhood of like 26%, I think, overall of appeals get overturned. So, I mean, this was just for 1 year, but I got to tell you, you guys got to get on the ball and make sure you educate your customers. They may be getting a denial for no reason whatsoever. Go out, FBI.gov, forms.fbi.gov, get that NICS resolution card request. All you have to do is print it off, provide it to them, put down the NTN number that was issued, and let them go through the process. You'd be surprised. You may actually have a customer for life out of that.
All right, guys, just a reminder, we will be going through questions in order as they come in, so be sure to type them in. Every question is a good question.
Yep. All right, it's inspection time. We're going to talk about strategies for success, but first, we've got another win under our belts. Just last week, we were notified by the ATF of another one of the revocations that we've been working on, that FFL is getting to stay in business and keep their license. I have to tell you, that's just another great victory for us. We've had a number of them so far. This particular one actually lasted 10 months. It got to the point that both myself and the director of industry operations for the field division were scratching our heads wondering, okay, when are we actually going to get an answer on this? So it took quite a long time. In the meantime, the FFL is sitting out there in the wind wondering what's going to happen. Should I liquidate my assets? What should I do? But I'm really proud to say that I think we've found the formula for success in most situations, and we're going to keep working towards them. I don't even remember the number we have on the docket right now. I want to say it's well above the 50 mark. So I know that we got 5 last week. I think it was 3 on Thursday and 2 on Friday. That's 5 more FFLs that have been cited for zero tolerance violations, and hence they are getting they received a notice of revocation. Just be aware of this. Just because you get a notice of revocation doesn't mean that's the end. All right, but it is a lengthy process, and depending on the situation, it takes a lot of work to get through. So if you're not ready for it, you need to be, and you need to take all of the information we're giving you today to heart and get in front of it. All right. So JB is going to cover all of the revocation scenarios that we've been seeing by order of importance. And what I mean by that is these are the most common at the top of the list. So take it away, JB.
Yeah, thanks, John. So there's a lot of inspections going on. You've seen those numbers, a tremendous amount of people passing, and we're super excited. We're going to tell you in a minute, again, how to pass your inspection so you don't have to worry about any of this, but you want to stay off the target. Here's the targets that they're looking at. Of all of the issues we're dealing with and any information we're getting our hands on that's being published by the ATF, self-identified, people self-identifying using questions 21 B through L, they answer yes instead of no. That's an incomplete, that's a prohibited transfer. You're not allowed to do that. Similarly, if someone leaves one of those questions blank, it is an incomplete background check, and that is also a big problem, and that can get you revoked. So those prohibiting questions, section 21, A through L must be completed accurately. It's not on here, but while we're talking about it, 21.1.2, it's alien immigration. If somebody checks that box, no by mistake, the ATF said you don't have to have them cross that out and initial and date it because they answered no instead of leaving it blank. Just, I know somebody's gonna ask that question, so you can either have it corrected or you can leave it as is. You will not be cited on that, but try to prevent that from happening. Second on this list is premature transfer date or the Brady date. When the Brady date is delayed, you are supposed to wait, obviously, those 3 business days. We tell everyone 3 equals 5. So if you're transferring 1 day short, if it's Friday and one of your employees thinks the weekend counts and they transfer their gun on a delay on Monday, you will be revoked. 1 violation. This is again a 0 tolerance program. 1 can get you revoked. Transfer after 30 days. If you're certified, if the certification date in box 23 is exceeded, when you finally transfer a gun on a delay or someone gets proceeded and just doesn't come pick it up, make sure you're pulling out a calendar and actually count 30 days. It's a little bit confusing sometimes when there's 30 and 31 days in a month. So make sure your staff has a good practice in place to make sure that 30 days has not expired and you don't need to rerun a background check or a new 4473. If that happens, give us a call. We'll tell you how to do it. We have a lot of dealers just saying, can I make it 28 days? Can I just tell my staff, don't worry, it's going to be 25 days. You as an FFL can make up any rule in your store, your location that you deem necessary to make your process more definite and defined. Expired or out-of-state CCW or LTC. This is surprisingly popping up more than we ever expected, but nicely, we're getting many calls about this. Folks are at least calling and asking the right questions. Can I accept a CCW from another state if my state allows for an exemption for a carry permit to bypass the NICS background check? And the answer is no, another state does not qualify. And you may have someone with a CCW standing on the other side of the counter yelling about reciprocity. Reciprocity is only allowed, is only enforced for the carry of concealed weapons in another state where it's accepted, not bypassing the background check process to purchase a firearm. And not only out of state, but the expired CCW is going to also disqualify any type of background check for you, resulting in a revocation. Missing or incorrect NICS point of contact NTN control numbers. JC talked about this earlier. That number in box 27B, for the most part, if it's NICS, is a 9-digit number, not 8, not 10. And those numbers have to be exact to the number communicated to you from the NICS operator. It's critically important to go ahead and print those NICS transaction reports on all of your proceeds. Make sure you have the right information in there because you can prove you did a background check, and you can refer back to that document in case you have a missing number during your review process and you need to go back and fill it in or correct it. So print your NTN reports, NICS transaction number reports. Expired IDs. This is, most people say, well, I'm not going to accept an expired ID. I always look at that. But the problem is when we are transferring that information to the 4473, we are accidentally looking at the date of birth and copying that into the space for expiration date on line 26A. You must make sure you're not copying the wrong date there. This is a great time to talk about copies of IDs. So most of you like keeping copies of IDs, and if you do so, the same thing with carry permits, go ahead and keep them separate. Do not file them with your 4473s because the ATF can also find fault in comparisons when they audit you between the document and your ID document. But go ahead and keep them separate. We call it a parallel file. If you're filing August 4473s in this folder this month, file the IDs and copies you might be keeping. We call them business records in a file marked August 2022 in a separate file in a file cabinet. Don't put them together. Don't provide them to the ATF for reasons of inspection. Missing firearms, stolen firearms. JC, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, just so everybody is aware, we got a notification last week from one of our client FFLs that they had a stolen firearm. Unfortunately, in this situation, one of the other owners took it upon themselves to take actions immediately and notify the ATF. Just so everybody is aware, if you file a missing, lost, stolen firearm report, it could instigate an inspection. Now, I will tell you that the chances of it instigating inspection if a firearm is lost in transit is slim. They're more focused on missing inventory or stolen inventory. So just be aware of that. It instigated an inspection, and Friday I was supposed to go down for my quarterly review with them. And unfortunately, I got stuck in the middle of a paper party with their entire team. He's got about 10 people tied up. That's 10 people, hourly personnel, that are tied up in a paper party right now to make sure all their ATF Form 4473s are accurate and complete. And if any corrections need to be made, to take the appropriate steps to do that. So needless to say, he is spending hours and hours on this process to make sure that he is 100% for his inspection. So just be aware that it will instigate an inspection. Do me a favor, call us first so we can make sure that all the bases are covered. We had an FFL that was missing over 160 firearms during an inventory. And before he actually notified the ATF of that, we gave him some insights to find those firearms. And luckily, he found all 165 of them. So just be aware.
Yeah, even one is a problem. So if you call us, we'll help you find it. We have methods for just about everything. Next is missing ATF 4473s. This doesn't come up a lot, but if you're filing your records according to the transaction serial number in the top right corner, the ATF will inspect for sequential numbers. They will ask you if something's missing. So if you've got a software process, some of the software programs out there put a transaction serial number on every 4473, whether it's completed, started, nixed, approved, and not approved, proceeded. There's processes we have different documents. We call it a placeholder that you can insert into your filing system to alert the ATF that maybe that transaction serial number is on a denial in a different folder. So there's all types of things we can help you with, but the ATF is looking for every number. It's laborious, but if you're filing your records chronologically by date, you're ahead of the game. You're not going to be held accountable to that standard. So there's pros and cons basically to all of this, but they are looking for it. Failing to respond to traces, obviously we talked about this, 24 hours is your time of reply, because that trace is going through many hands of custody, whether from the importer manufacturer to a distributor to a dealer, maybe transferred, maybe, and then finally to a customer. That the ATF's probably holding somebody's probably under arrest, pending the outcome of this trace to see if they're in possession of a stolen firearm. And there's other types of crimes associated with this, but that trace is critical to get completed within 24 hours. And maintain your proof. If you're faxing in, make sure you're keeping proof of your fax confirmation. Attach it to insert it with your 4473. If you're emailing it in, make sure you're copying yourself, or at least keeping a copy of your sent emails in a special folder to show and to prove that you responded to a trace. And the same thing on the on your multiple firearm forms, 3310.4 and 12. If you're sending them in or faxing them, make sure first of all they're done and completed by the end of the same business day, that they qualify, and that they're submitted, whether it be U.S. mail, fax, or email. Keep proof of forwarding and sending in these documents. They will challenge you on these.
All right, hey, JB, go back real quick. All right, I got 3 things for you real quick. All right, self-identified prohibited. Obviously, that's an issue. Here's a secondary issue to that. If they self-identify as prohibited and you proceed with a background check, you will be cited, and that is revocable. So keep in mind, if somebody self-identifies as a prohibited person, do not do a background check. Number 2, for that NICS expiration date, we have asked NICS to actually add the expiration date of the background check to that summary sheet. We'll keep you posted on that. I think we have a pretty good chance of getting that done. We spoke to leadership at NICS about it, and they kind of looked at us like, God, that was a smart idea. We should have done that a long time ago. So we'll keep you posted. Number 3, JB mentioned it. NICS search history queries. Print those off on a daily basis and maintain them on file. This helps you identify missing ATF Form 4473s. It makes you make sure you can account for every NICS transaction number and who they were issued to. Vitally, vitally important. And the last thing I want to mention, we say it on the slide, got proof? Make sure you're maintaining proof of trace request responses and multiple firearm form submissions. That's that 3310.4 and 3310.12. Keep proof. If you're sending them electronically, copy yourself on that email. If you are sending them electronically through email, look for that receipt. Look for them to respond with a received. All right. Make sure you're keeping record of that. I cannot tell you how many times we have FFL clients that are inspected that the IOI comes in and they say, we're missing this trace, or we're missing these traces, or you haven't submitted multiple firearm forms. They're going to verify all that stuff. So you have to have proof. All right.
Yeah.
That's all I got
JC,
on that.
yeah, JC, you got some passion, baby. Go back to the, I'm sorry, go back to the NICS search screen at the end of the day. What is the name of that report?
That is
first
called,
of all, wait, first of all, if you're not on eNICS, if you're still calling in background checks, please consider going to eNICS. It's a great way to keep track of everything and have timely reporting and proof of all of your background checks. But JC, what's the end of day report they should be printed?
It is called the NICS search history query. And it's in your little drop down there on the left, and you'll hit it, and it'll when you select that and you open that option up, it's going to give you two fields there. You can delete one of them. The one you need to keep is the created on field, right? And then just say created on, use the operator equal to, and that's today's date, right? That's whatever date you're running it for. Keep in mind, those NTN numbers drop off. Even point of contact states, those control numbers drop off after 24 hours. That is federal law. They cannot keep that information. So you only have 24 hours to grab that, grab it, save it as a PDF, print it off, save it in a file. Trust me, you do not know how many FFLs butts we have saved because they implemented that process and could prove that they did a background check on that customer. So it's huge win.
Just make it part of your closing process every night.
Yep. Just like your 3310.4s. You run those, you print those, you send those, you do whatever you do that search history query as well.
And JC, I was on a high volume dealer this week. They do between 15 and 25 transfers a day. And they actually use that report to make sure they have a 4473 for every background check they submitted.
Yeah, we have a lot of FFL clients that actually just attach that search history query right to the front of that folder for that month's 4473s. So it just tells the ATF when they come in for an inspection that they go above and beyond and make sure they're doing things right. All right, GIRFT, baby, GIRFT. You're hearing it here first. Look at Biden. He doesn't even know what's going on. Get it right the first time. GIRFT. So here you go. All right. Previous inspections, no repeat violations. Keep in mind, when you go through an inspection and they cite you for a violation, your ATF IOI is going to come in. They're going to know exactly what happened on those previous inspections. So you want to make sure that you've been told no repeat violations. So make sure that's the case. So pull those reported violations out and make sure none of that stuff is happening again. All right. Previous adverse action. This is really, really important. No violations. You can have no violations if you went through a warning conference or a warning letter or received a warning letter. So no violations. So again, pull out that report of violations, pull out that adverse action, see what they talk to you about, and make sure you're covered there. All right. Review every 4473 before that transfer, before that gun gets handed over to that customer. Make sure that you are reviewing multiple reviews of that 4473. If you have employees, make sure that they are aware they're not doing their buddy, their coworker any favors by just giving it a once over glance. They need to actually be critical. Trust me, when they're critical, you're saving your buddy's butt. All right. So make sure every time before that gun is transferred, that form is getting reviewed. You can review it at the end of the month. You can review it at the end of the week. You can review it at the end of the day. But the fact of the matter is, it does you no good if you're not doing it before the firearm's transferred. Conduct those inventories. We recommend on a quarterly basis. Obviously, if you have a limited supply or you're not a big dealer, maybe that doesn't make sense for you. but you definitely need to be doing your inventories, even cycle counts. If you have a ton of firearms, do cycle counts to make sure everything is accounted for. Complete those A&D record book entries on a daily basis. All right. You got 24 hours, but I'm going to tell you, make it a part of your closing process to make sure everything is accounted for. Take the time to get that done. Prevent those straw purchases. We're going to talk about genuine interest and genuine intent, but I got to tell you right now, if you're susceptible to straw purchases, they're going to be looking at you. So make sure that you got that covered. We'll cover that in a second. Those 3310.4s and 3310.12s, end of business day. JB, how many FFLs do we have that process these things the next day? Or, oops, I forgot.
Yep. Well, if you process them the next day, I call it half a problem. But you send in 3, 4, 5 of those late, you will be inspected, and you will be at least warned. You'll at least receive a warning, but they can revoke you on that.
There you go. So, and then again, can't reiterate it enough. Those ATF traces, you need to make sure you are getting those done within 24 hours. The National Tracing Center wants it done as soon as possible. They're hoping to get it while they're on the phone with you. So just get those done within 24 hours. All right. Obviously, if you need support, call us, email us. We're there for you. Straw purchase prevention. This is key to your success. You do not want to be called out for straw purchases. You do not want to become the focus due to straw purchases. So you need to make sure that you and your staff are evaluating every sale for genuine interest and genuine intent. Think about what your atypical customer looks like. Think about how excited they are, how inquisitive they are, how they're comparing different firearms, or they're looking for specific models, or whatever the case may be. Look at that common transaction and basically overlay that over every transaction. If they're not asking all those questions that a common customer asks, you need to have that gut feeling and start challenging that transaction as to whether or not it's real or if it's a straw purchase. You want to qualify your customer to prevent straw purchases. That means you're asking them questions. You're inquiring with them. You're challenging them with, oh, did you see this other model? Or what's your caliber? Are you comfortable shooting, etc.? You need to provide that customer service, incorporate straw purchase prevention in customer service. Empower your staff. That's really, really key. Let them know that if they don't feel right about the transaction, either they can make the right call, or if they're not comfortable or you're not comfortable with them making the right call, have them come to you and you take over the transaction and evaluate it. These are solid procedures that we have seen implemented across FFLs throughout the country that have worked. So you need to make sure that everybody knows they can make the right call. And if the right call is to get you involved in the transaction, then so be it. Communicate the importance of attention to detail. That is really key. You need to make sure those 4473s are correct. You need to make sure you know who's doing what with the 4473, who's doing what with the cash. How is the transaction occurring? If it's 2 people that have approached you and one person is doing all the talking and handling the firearm and so on, and at the end of the sale, the other person all of a sudden hops in, that's attention to detail. Look for those signs, those cues, to make sure that you are 100% on every transaction before the transfer. All right, 100%. You have to be certain. And then drive accountability. It's your business. If you're an absentee owner, get us involved. If you're an absentee owner, you need to be paying attention. All right, so just be sure that you're driving that accountability with your employees. We've got a ton of FFLs going through revocation right now because an employee wasn't trained, because an employee wasn't knowledgeable, because an employee made a mistake. All right. And yeah, I can't stress enough how much you need to be involved in your business every day.
Yeah, and guys, we can't go through all of the straw purchase training and all the scenarios and the gift giving and all that, but hey, less straw purchasing equals less denials, which will be keep you lower on the totem pole for getting an inspection. So call us if you have any of those questions. Okay. All right. JC, we got some time limits here, so we'll have to get through the questions. We will answer all these questions. Some great questions. I'm looking at them. Stick around with us. We will get to all of them.
Yep. All right, we're going to run through this real quick just to drive some awareness around inspection readiness, okay? Get ready to talk to your ATF inspection by, what to expect when the ATF walks in the door. First of all, they're going to come in with the NTN or point of contact state control numbers. Now, typically they'll grab the last 60 days to compare them to your last 60 days of records to account for every NICS transaction number or control number you've been issued. But anticipate they can go as far as 88 days. We like to make sure the last 3 or 4 months are 100% accurate, complete, and checked. So just be aware of that. They're going to come in with a list of all the traces that were not completed. So they're going to contact the NICS tracing center and they're going to find out if you didn't complete a trace request, and they're going to look for that paperwork. They're going to come in with a list of all your submitted 3310.4s and 3310.12s. If that applies to you, those are the border states. They're going to know whether or not you've submitted all of your multi-sale reports. They're going to know if you've submitted any 3310.11s, that's theft loss reports. They're going to know that. They're going to look for stuff. They're going to know whether they're going to take a look at your NFRTR. That is your National Firearm Registration and Transfer Record. This is for our NFA dealers and manufacturers. They are going to obtain that from the NFA division and verify your inventory against that. I will tell you, you need to go out to the eForms platform. If you are an NFA dealer or manufacturer, print off your NFRTR and review it internally, do an inventory. I can tell you 100% that these things are wrong from time to time. All right. So you want to make sure that thing is 100%. That's all the NFA firearms that are issued to your license. So you need to make sure you're 100%. Results from your last inspection. They're going to look at your last inspection and look for repeat violations. They're also going to obtain intel from local law enforcement. So if you're in a bad crime area or you've got the focus of the local law enforcement agency, they're going to know that maybe the local LE department does not like you or has information about you. So they're going to be in there looking for things relative to any intelligence they gather from them. Supplemental docs and business records. JB talked about this a minute ago. If it is not required to be with the ATF form 4473, and there's only a few scenarios where you're required to maintain supplemental documentation related to that transaction, do not store that information with the 4473 unless it's required. That's copies of identifications, copies of concealed carry permits, copies of change of address or supplemental docs used for proof of address. Those are not required to be kept with the 4473. Those are not even required for you to keep them. Now, we do state that it is a good practice to maintain those records, but maintain them separately. They should not in any way be maintained with the 4473 that they correspond to. So keep that in mind. Trust me, you don't want to give the ATF anything more to judge or inspect you against. Okay, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, 2 quick things, JC. So results from your last inspection, don't wait. The ATF doesn't wait to show up until they show up to read that. They read that well in advance, 2, 3, 4, 5 days in advance of your inspection. They come in with those items targeted for re-inspection. So you should be doing the same thing. You should be looking at your last inspection results and violations, any documentation from last inspection or last couple of inspections, and make sure you don't have any of those reoccurrences at all. Review them with your staff to pay special attention to those. And on the supplementary docs issue last week, this is a great story. Last week we had someone up in the Northeast call. They were getting inspected. Thankfully, the ATF came in on one day to do the NFA the suppressors and NFA inventory. And he calls me that afternoon. As soon as they left, he says, JB, he goes, they're here. What do I do? And we sent them our guide, and they stayed up all night separating IDs from their 4473, separating all the business documents from their record keeping. And it was crazy interesting because they got through their inspection pretty much with flying colors after 4 or 5 days. And the inspector even asked them where all their copies of their IDs were, because on the last inspection, they were all there. And they spent a lot of time comparing business records to the 4473s, driver's licenses, CCWs, miscellaneous paperwork, receipts, sales receipts. And he says, JB, I think you saved us on this one. I'm glad we stayed here they literally stayed till 5 in the morning doing that. for 2 or 3 nights in a row. There's a whole process. We call it the paper party. But he was super thankful that he actually spent the time doing that. So just get ahead of that now. Great story. All right, guys. And please, I just mentioned that the inspection guide, JC and I have taken everything we know about everything we're talking about. We put it into how to prepare for your next inspection. It's a guide available right on our website. Just go to fflconsultants.com. It's right at the bottom. It says, click here to download how to pass Biden's ATF inspection guide. Very easy, very simple to use. Many of our clients are using it. It's free. We want you guys to pass your next inspection and get that. Share it with everyone on your team who handles anything with firearms. Okay. And hey, if you want us to come out, help you, if you got questions, if you're an NSSF member, there's some great deals available. As we say, the best deal in town. Just call us to find out how you can have JC or myself come out and do a mock inspection. Believe it or not, we're going in 2 weeks. We're going to one very large retailer for 5 days. He's very concerned about his process, hasn't been inspected in 5 years, and doesn't want to get revoked. I mean, that's a big job for us. Usually we're on site for 1 or 2 days. But JC, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we've done 400 inspections since January, and only 6 have reviewed perfectly. I've had 2.
Yeah, right around there. Well, yeah, I think it's right around 6. We might
I've had 2. I think you have 4. But out of all the dealers we've gone to, 6, maybe 7 have skated through with flying colors. Everyone else had either warning issues or revocation issues that we were able to correct. So
yeah, we're booking 2 to 3 inspections a week. So if you're interested, get on our calendars. We're all over the country, 48 weeks out of the year. So keep that in mind.
Yep. And if any of you are any pawnbrokers attending Dixie's Pawn Expo next week, I'll be there. I'll be presenting a lot of the similar information. Come see us on Wednesday morning. I think 9 o'clock. I'll be in the NSSF booth. If you got questions or want to learn more about membership, please stop by or schedule time with me if you just got questions you want to talk through. So that's next week in Perdido Beach, going to the beach. All right, JC, time for the questions. We still got, it's great. We're so happy all of you stayed on with us. Thank you very much. We're going to start going through these questions in the order they were received. So JC, you ready?
I'm ready, brother. Let's do the lightning round here. Let's keep them anonymous. We don't need to embarrass anybody or anything like that. So keep them in an anonymous fashion. Yeah,
let's get through those few we had come in on email before the event. Do you have those handy?
Yeah, I've got them handy. Hang on 1 second. Let me just pull up that window. All right, here we go. Question number 1. When we receive lower receivers for AR type firearms that are serial numbered from the manufacturer, I have been recording them as stripped lower receiver or complete lower receiver in the type of firearm column. Is this acceptable under the new final rule? These are not 80% firearms and or receivers. These are ready to be completed or already come complete. Well, here's a quick answer to that. They are neither a stripped lower receiver or a complete lower receiver. They are just simply a receiver, and that is all that you are required to document. The ATF does not recognize or care whether or not it's stripped or fully completed. It is just a receiver. So that is how you have to document it, both on the 4473 and in your A&D records. Question number 2, can I still dispose of denied and no firearm transferred 4473s that are older than 5 years prior to the new regulations? Can I turn in completed 4473s that are older than 20 years prior to the new regulation? Well, here's the first thing I'm going to tell you. The new regulation went into effect on 8/24. That was last Thursday, JB?
Yep, last week.
8/24. So guess what? As far as the ATF is concerned, you now have to maintain those records for the life of your license. So that's until you go out of business. Now, for those denied, or what we call dealer canceled with NTN numbers, those records are still only required to be maintained for 5 years. So you need, and ATF, when they come in for an inspection, they know what NTN numbers have been issued specifically for those denied transactions. They have that information forever. And then the dealer canceled with NTN as well. If a firearm has not been transferred, but you were issued a NICS control number or NICS transaction number and a point of contact state control number, you need to maintain those for 5 years. We say 5 years in 1 day. All right. So let's see.
Hey, let me. You ready for lightning round, JC?
I got a few more here. Hold on.
Okay.
Logbook errors, the proper way to correct them. Really simple. Just keep it simple. All right. Just notate, single line out, initial date, and then just put a little brief explanation of what you had to do. Now, if you have to move that information from that spot, what you'll do is you will dispose of it by stating where you put it, what date you put it on, initial that, and put the reason for the move. So if you don't have room and you need to move it to a new line number, you just give it a nice little simple kind of explanation of why you did it. Errors noticed at the time of entry, line through date and initial. Yes, 100%. ATF form 4473, any error corrections, please don't just initial. It must be initialed and dated for error corrections. Now that's on the original form before the firearm is transferred, or if you identify the error after the firearm has been transferred, you are going to need to make that correction on a photocopy of the page that the error exists on. And obviously, you can only make corrections to the sections you as the FFL are responsible for, and the customer must make the corrections to the sections that they are responsible for. Don't get caught making corrections for customers. That's falsifying a 4473. Yeah. Errors noticed. Go ahead.
No, and there's lots of ways to get this all happening, guys. Call us. You can mail the form to the customer if they live 2 hours away. If it's just a date of birth, if there's something minor that they need to correct. So give us a call. We have lots of tips and tricks. And never use whiteout. I actually had that again this week. I actually had somebody using whiteout, so don't do that.
Yeah. Errors noticed during in-house reviews of logbook after the initial entry was made. Line through date error was identified initial. I just answered that one. Use of notes. Can the FFL attach a typewritten computer-generated set of notes with explanations of logbook errors? If so, what should the entry include? Really simple. We even recommend this with 4473s if it's something complicated. Just do an internal memo for record and explain the situation and explain how you fixed it. It's really that simple. And then just keep it in a record on the side or with the 4473. So when the ATF comes in, they know exactly what was going on there.
The other question on corrections, yes, your customer must initial end date. So you got to get them to initial end date their errors if they make any, and don't let them scribble out everything. I mean, we look at these forms every day, and if we look at it through the eyes of the ATF inspector. If we have problems with it, they're going to have problems with it. Don't let the ATF wants to see what information was there before it was changed.
Yep. All right, lightning round time, JB.
Okay, when the ATF revokes an FFL, JC, can they take your guns from the business and personal guns?
No, they don't take guns.
So I get that question once a week, though.
If you receive a notice of revocation, that's just simply to notify you that, hey, we're considering revoking, suspending, or issuing you a fine related to your FFL. You have 15 days to respond to that notification. You're not out of business. You're not shutting down business. You're going to go through the revocation process. And if you need our support or our attorney, law firm partner support, we'll get you that support. But you're talking months upon months of going through that process. So yes, you'll still be in business. No, they're not going to take your firearms. Even if you do get revoked, they're going to give you a period of time to liquidate your assets.
Yeah, and as you said that, JC, you said lawyers. Listen, guys, these revocation processes takes months. That's a lot of time and effort by ourselves, by the attorneys, unless you just want to try to go it alone. And that being said, the NSSF has a great program that's very super affordable. If you want to learn more about it, all the pieces of it, let us know. Let us help you understand it and find out if that's the right thing for you. It's a lot cheaper than having to call an attorney. So, what JC? Somebody said it's like what, the price of a cup of coffee?
Yep, it's a price. NSSF membership costs less than a price of coffee per day at Starbucks.
There you go.
Not that any of us like Starbucks, but that's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah. All right. Next one, if you do paper bound books, do you start a new bound book with these new column heading changes?
You can certainly transition to a new bound book. Absolutely. I mean, if you're using paper, that's probably the best way to do it, is just move your open entries over to the new bound book. You're going to close out the old bound book. You still have to maintain that on record for the life of your license. But you'll close out each one of those firearms that are still open disposition by initialing, dating, and then basically documenting where that firearm moved to and why. That's all.
Yeah, the one problem is the printers haven't gotten these out in time. So most FFLs are simply using a pen, writing in the addition to the column heading into their open bound books and moving forward. And when new bound books are available, you can consolidate and move it all. But you can easily just update those headings with a pen and be compliant. Do we need to file instructions with the 3310? That's a good question. And I'm assuming this is with scanning.
Yeah, no, they're not required to be maintained at all, unless you're utilizing the original document that you got from the ATF distribution center. If you're printing them off and you print it off on both sides, then obviously it's with it. But if you print off just that top copy, you're totally fine with that. Just make sure it's with the 4473.
Yep. Can we print the ATF 4473E form on both sides of the paper, saving 3 sheets of paper? Yes, that's
absolutely. Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
It's still got ink, but you can save the paper. Next, you mentioned one bound book. Is it still all right to maintain more than one paper bound book by kind of firearm? Example, Colt, Smith & Wesson, and other. Okay, that's a concern.
Yeah, for dealers, there is no requirement to consolidate your bound books. That is only for manufacturers and importers. So as it relates to dealers, gunsmiths, etc., you can maintain multiple bound books. Absolutely.
But to JC, to your earlier point, you're either all paper or you're all electronic.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't do, retail sales is electronic and gunsmithing is paper. You need to consolidate everything onto electronic.
Yeah. And that might be
still maintain multiple books.
And that could be a challenge for some of the software providers out there who don't have a gunsmith section set up in their electronic A&D.
Yep.
So be careful of that. Are denials required to be kept now beyond 5 years with the recent changes?
No, only for completed transfers.
Yep.
Do you have to maintain it for the life of the license?
Yeah. Going back through 4473s, we found a multi-gun transfer we missed. We immediately submitted required paperwork, but it was 8 months late.
Oh, ouch. Chances are pretty good that might instigate an inspection. It really just kind of depends on your history. Here's what I would tell you. Anytime you're submitting them late, down there in block 15 on that multiple sale report, that's true of 3310.4 and 3310.12. They're basically the same form. You want to give a little explanation. And what we always recommend is kind of illustrate to the ATF that you are going above and beyond. During an internal audit, we discovered X, right? And that's how we like you to explain it. Give them something roasty. Give them something to make them feel good. All right. So always utilize that box 15 on that form to explain yourself.
Yeah. And sending it in late is, as we say, half a problem versus a whole problem. Yeah. It's a different citable violation. Is there any way to get the tracing center to stop sending trace requests late at night when the business is closed?
That's I'm actually surprised they're doing that. I don't know why they're doing that. Yeah, I can't believe because most of the examiners are contractors at the National Tracing Center, so that's pretty interesting. I'll push that one up to the chief at the National Tracing Center and see what's going on. Maybe we'll talk offline on that.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Well, yeah, and if you guys are receiving them on email, again, check your email. If you're on vacation, make sure somebody's checking it for you if it's one of your store-based email addresses.
Yep.
Can you elaborate
JB,
more? Yeah.
JB, I got a direct message here. Somebody wanted to remain completely anonymous, but they just wanted to double check and make sure. And this is the state of Florida, so just keep that in mind. This is a state regulatory question. Can a customer trade in a pistol or a long gun, or rather, can they trade in a pistol for a long gun or a long gun for a pistol and not have to complete the waiting period for Florida? Yes, absolutely. In trade-in scenarios in the state of Florida, the waiting period, they are exempt for that if it is truly a trade-in or exchange of firearms.
Right. And the reason is very simple. The whole cooling off period in Florida is for someone with a, to make sure they're not emotionally buying a firearm for the wrong reason. So it makes sense that if somebody's giving you a firearm, they already had a firearm and they're going to get another one in return.
Right.
So,
The state of Florida looks at firearms transactions and that financial attribute of it. So,
yeah. And in case it doesn't come up here, guys, there's so many new state laws coming out. We get those calls all week long. Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I transfer to somebody from this state that here in my stores, the AR bans where they live, because there's no AR bans here, is a magazine bans. Those are, you're not going to find any one repository with all those answers, but feel free to call us and we'll give you the right answer. Can you elaborate more on the consolidation of records with importing versus regular A&D records?
Well, importing and manufacturers are required to consolidate their records. They can't maintain multiple books involving their manufacturing and importation processes. As far as regular A&D records, I'm assuming you're referring to A&D for dealers, gunsmiths, and pawnbrokers. In that case, no consolidation is required. In other words, if you have an A&D book being maintained for your retail firearms and you have an A&D book being maintained for your gunsmithing operations, you can still have those two records separated, segregated to keep track of things. But when it comes to importing and manufacturing, those records are required to be consolidated, all in one.
Yeah. All right, here's a good one. On multiple firearm sales that fall on different days, does it still require same-day reporting on the second day?
Sure, that's what instigated the multiple firearm sale. So it has to be submitted by the end of the second day or the end of the day that the multiple sale occurred on. Make sense?
Yeah. And a lot of people get stuck on question 2, where it says, is this multiple firearm sale attached or connected with prior qualifying multiple report? So if somebody buys a gun on 2 guns on Friday, they get a multiple handgun report sent in. If they come in the following Tuesday and buy another handgun, the answer would be yes to that question. That's one of the few times that question is ever answered yes, is when they're buying a lot of guns in over a 5-day period, basically.
Right.
More
The
than
other
one
thing
day.
that comes up with that one, JB, is where do you attach that 3310.4 or 12? You attach it to the 4473 that instigated the multi-sale. You don't have to go back and attach it to the first one. It only has to stay with the one that actually caused the multi-sale.
Right. Okay, and file it with the 4473. That's important.
Yeah.
Okay.
With yes.
If we have not done that for past transactions, will we be fine? Just do it from now on.
Well, if
So
you
the
haven't
answer-
been doing your multi-sale forms for past transactions, you need to have a
John,
conversation with us.
I'm sorry, John, that's a different, this person's, I'm sorry, it's a piggyback to a prior question on consolidating the A&D. So if they haven't consolidated up until now, can they just basically start consolidating going forward?
Yeah, you're required to as of August 24th.
Okay.
You didn't have to do it prior. The regulations don't go back. They only go forward unless specifically identified.
Okay, if I go to my neighborhood, here's what we've been talking about. If I go to my neighborhood state, my neighboring state to do a gun sale, a gun show rather, I can take orders, but I can't transfer while in that state. But can I have the customer fill out the 4473 in that neighboring state at that gun show?
Negative. You cannot.
And the reason is simple, guys. You are licensed to conduct business in your state, period. You're licensed for business in your state. So if you're doing any other shortcuts, we get these calls. I was at a big gun show on Saturday. We get these calls all the time about what can I do? What can't I do? And everybody tries to bend or twist the law a little bit. Just don't get caught doing it. Yeah, illegal is still illegal. And the ATF has spent a lot of time recently over the last couple of years pushing out that pamphlet on how to properly manage your FFL in regards to gun shows. So if you need that, call us or go online and you can grab that. On the topic of out-of-state concealed carry permits or license to carry, assuming they are valid, why are they not acceptable forms of identification for the 4473?
They
Um,
are
yeah.
acceptable forms of identification for the 4473, as long as they contain all of the attributes of what the ATF clarifies as acceptable form of identification. That means they have to be valid, they have to have a residence address, they have to have basically an expiration date, right? They have to have a
Photo
date of birth,
and
and they
photo.
have to have a photo. So those are completely acceptable forms of identification. But a lot of concealed carry permits and LTCs don't have all those attributes.
Yeah, I think the question might be positioned, John, is why are they not acceptable? They're not acceptable for the exemption for the background check,
Right.
right? If they're out of state, even if the other state allows a concealed carry permit to be exempt from background checks for a firearms purchase, they do that part of it does not transfer across the state.
That's right. So
Right.
let's use Louisiana and Texas, right? Now, Texas, the LTC is exempt from going through the NICS background check. However, that's not all encompassing. You as an FFL can decide that you are not going to accept that, and you are going to run a background check for everybody. The problem is in the state of Texas, under the rules of NICS, only a Texas issued LTC authorizes that exemption. Any other state does not authorize that exemption because it's under an agreement with the state of Texas. So that's pretty much kind of the legal kind of globe around that thing.
Yeah, and NICS very closely scrutinizes the way sheriffs or law enforcement issues their concealed carry permits in every state. And if they find fault with the process, they do not honor that. They eliminate that exemption. So, and they change it, year to year, based on how the process is for issuing concealed carry permits in a different state. So, people ask that often. That's what happens.
Yep.
All right. What are the? Here's a good one, John. What are some of the violations that the revocations are being overturned and which are leading to revocation surrender? So, it's not really which violations. I'll start out with this and you can jump in.
Yeah.
It's not which violations are being overturned or moved from a revocation, maybe back to a warning, which we've been successful in doing. Believe me, we have not got anybody from a revocation to a clean visit. That's almost impossible. But at least your goal is to go from revocation one step back to a warning and maybe a monetary fine if necessary. But it's really the evidence that we are able to present from the FFL to the Director of Industry Operations, the ATF Director, and the legal attorney, ATF Legal Counsel, in defense of your activities, your thought process, your practices, your standard operating procedures, if you have them, the way you hire and train people, the way you process transfers and do background checks. All of that, as JC said, it takes months to get through this process. We call it, the legal term is discovery. Once you get a hearing date set, we start to say, okay, we're going to defend your actions that they're citing you for. And then we have to prove to them you were acting without willfulness and unknowingly making errors and mistakes. And we have to prove that. You can't just assert it. So
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of pieces to this to make the puzzle look right. A lot of pieces to the puzzle, as we tell people.
Yeah, look, it's the arguments we can present. Not only is it the arguments we can present on your behalf as it relates to the cited violations that you're being revoked for, but it's also your compliance action plan, what you intend to do, what actions you took to mediate or mitigate those violations that occurred, why they happened, what you're doing to fix them going forward, what you're signing up for as far as, follow-up mock inspections. They really like that. Doing inventories, it really all depends on what the violations are, but it really comes down to, number one, what happened? Why did it happen? What are you going to do to fix it? And going forward, what are the corrective actions that you're going to take to make sure your business operates 100%?
Yeah, and here's the unhappy statement I'll conclude this part with is most ATF directors want to see the person most at fault fired for the issues, the mistakes, the errors, the carelessness.
Yep.
And that's a hard conversation we have with most FFLs when they call us. We say, okay, what'd you do about it? And they say, well, he's been here a long time, or she's been here a long time, or this is the first time they did this or that. but the bottom line is they're going to cause you to go out of business.
Yeah.
They're going to, you know, so don't be, if you're one of those FFLs that calls us over the next 6 months or a year, we're gonna ask that question. What did you do with the people, the employees who caused this to happen? So
yeah, an FFL that we're supporting right now actually had a actually terminate a couple of family members due to the fact that they caused a revocable situation. So
put that out there with, so put it out there with your employees now. Have a program or policy in place that they know they can lose their job if you get inspected and have one of these errors, or if you just do your own internal review and find these errors. Make it, you know, have a program in place, corrective action program. What can the 4473 blank, all 6 pages, be printed and allow the customer to fill that out versus the bound one from the ATF?
The quick answer here is yes, absolutely. You know, obviously you can certainly order 4473s from the ATF distribution center, but there's nothing that says that you can't print off the version off of the ATF website and use that one. A caveat to that as well is if you're electronic and you have a customer, and obviously these are one-off situations, but folks, you do have customers out there that are not computer savvy or comfortable using a computer. You can also print one out and have them fill that out in pen and ink as well, and just maintain that separately on file. But absolutely, you can print off a 4473 off the ATF website and use it.
Yeah, I get this question all the time, JC. So if I use software to complete my 4473s, how do and the software locks the form after the customer completes their sections?
Yep.
How do I make corrections? How does a customer make corrections?
That's up to the individual software provider, how they generally how they allow that to happen. I would tell you that I think the vast majority of them actually make you just start all over again.
Either that, yeah.
Or what you can do is print it off and have them make the corrections in pen and ink and store it that way.
Yeah, that's traditionally the answer I give is print it off. You're not going to be able to unlock the software developers don't want to risk, you know, violating law and ATF requirements. So the bottom line is print off the completed 4473 and then have the customer initial and date, make the correction with pen and just simply initial and date it before they leave with the firearm. JC, I'm going to bring this up because I forgot to mention earlier, but who is the signature responsible signer in boxes 34 and 35 on a 4473? Who's supposed to sign?
The individual that actually transferred the firearm.
So it's the employee who actually handed the gun to the customer at the last stage of the process.
Yep.
After verifying their ID again, if it was a delay,
right, and
confirming the serial number on the gun, handing the right gun to the right person. That's the person who is signing that form.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Where can we find the best summary, not the actual regs, document for the new changes now in effect? Okay.
Actually, there's actually not only a PowerPoint presentation that the ATF has posted on their website, but if you go out to the ATF's YouTube page, they've actually got a recording of the presentation and ATF IOIs and folks from headquarters narrating all of the changes.
Yeah. Can you better define a list of traces not completed?
Well, really simple. What happens when you come up for inspection, the IOI that's been assigned your inspections going to go into their system or contact the National Tracing Center, and they're going to receive a list of all the trace requests that have been requested from you, and it will identify those trace requests that were not completed. You do not have access to this information. Only the ATF does.
Yep. What was the new requirements for the bound book concerning PMFs and the countries of manufacture? Where can I obtain a book that is compliant?
Well, the NSSF is pushing one out to their website, so you can certainly buy it on the NSSF website at their store. Not sure about other providers in this space as far as the paper bound books are concerned. We always kind of refer to NSSF for that. Just keep in mind that there's the dealer bound book and then there's the manufacturer and importer bound book. So the dealer bound book doesn't have anything of countries or countries of manufacture. That's only for manufacturers and importers. The only change that's going to occur in both scenarios is that personally made firearms language. So, and that goes right in that first column, the manufacturer importer column.
I'll tell you right away. We did this last week in a dealer. We took their paper bound book. It was a manufacturer. We took a ruler out and we found half an inch of space in his current paper bound book. And he simply drew a line down and put his own column heading in for country of origin.
Yep.
And that worked fine. And if you're using bound paper systems, you can do that now. Make it easy. Just follow the slide that we put out earlier to show you where that column fits into the heading line.
Right.
Okay. But yeah, we don't find there's not a lot of printers out there making these things available yet. Will a compliant driver license be acceptable for line 29 exception for NICS check? Well,
Absolutely not.
Right. Yeah,
Absolutely not. A driver's license has nothing to do with a NICS or a contact state exemption. Line 29 is only if you are a NICS exempt state and you can accept a concealed carry permit, license to carry, concealed handgun permit as an exception to a background check. And there's only, I don't know, 35 states, I think, that's the case. So no, driver's license has nothing to do with NICS exemptions.
Yeah. Here's a connected question is, can I use my concealed carry permit if it has all the qualifying requirements, both for the exemption in line 29 and for ID on line 26A?
Yep, absolutely. We see it in Texas all the time. People just use their LTC as a form of identification, completely acceptable. It has all the attributes required. And then obviously they also include that on line 29 for the NICS exemption.
Will you be sending us this presentation as a PDF or anything? Yes, we always put these out. Well, here's what we do. We put it out on YouTube about a week following this event. So it's go to FFL Consultants on YouTube and all of our past Zoom trainings are there. And if you email us directly, we can get you to PDF, but we make the video available on YouTube. On taking in, and I'm sorry, we always also do a follow-up email to you with a link to the YouTube, and I'll make a note here. We'll also make a link to the PDF this time around because there's so much information. We'll send that right to everyone registered for this event. On taking in firearms for a loan or purchase, we have been told that only leads and only managers can do such transactions, and that regular pawnbrokers cannot. Is this true? The answer is no, unless your state prevents it. But in general, the ATF has no disqualifying requirements for anyone associated with the FFL employed as a full-time W-2 employee for the FFL can manage your firearms business with and for you. Is that correct, JC?
Yeah, leads, it doesn't matter as long as they're a W-2 employee. Obviously, you can have internal policies and procedures around this, but there's nothing under regulation there's definitely at the federal level, there's nothing under regulation that stipulates what employee of the business can do what. Under state regulations, I would find that very unusual as well.
Yeah, and we even had somebody call us this morning. They wanted to know if a 15-year-old can work in the firearms store, and the answer is yes, under certain permissions, and we make that document available to you if you need it. So yeah, the ATF is pretty straightforward on all of their employment requirements. So call us if you have those questions. Can you discuss the storage laws required by the DOJ and ATF for a home-based FFL, basically personal versus for sale firearms by the FFL? Why don't you start with that one, JC? I'll go through the others.
All right. So here's the deal. It doesn't matter if you're a home-based kitchen table FFL or you have brick and mortar. One of two things need to happen. First of all, no matter what, you need to segregate the firearms inventory. If you can't do that, then you need to mark each individual firearm that is your personally owned firearm as such. So you just need to put a tag or something on it that says this is a personally owned firearm by whom. Okay. Our recommendation in this situation is that you store the two separately. So you put your personal firearms in a locker, in a safe, whatever the case may be, and you can mark that instrument that you're using to store your firearms as non-FFL inventory or personally owned firearms, whatever the case may be. So just keep them segregated if at all possible. Otherwise, you're going to have to tag each individual firearm.
Same person, next question. Does every firearm, personal and for sale, need to be secured in a safe when there are no minors or persons that are prohibited that live in the home?
All right. So federally, no, it's recommended, but it is not required by regulation. Now, I will tell you that multiple states do require you to secure firearms or have secure storage for firearms for sale. So it really depends on what state you're in.
Yeah, and there's a lot of state laws, guys. I was just in Washington State and California. There are a tremendous amount of state laws, publications, Illinois, signage you have to put out. Please make sure you're compliant with your state laws. New York, there's a lot of individual state requirements that people are just missing, but they're regulating now. They're going after your license because you don't have the right signs and language posted or even on the forms that you're presenting to your transferees, your customers. I have a small business and have been filing 4473 by logbook page and line number. Is this all right?
Yeah, totally fine. You just have to make sure that you're utilizing that, whatever, it's actually a transaction serial number, that you're creating that transaction serial number and actually documenting it on the front of the 4473 in the little box at the upper top right that says transaction serial number.
Yeah.
Not the best practice. I don't like it. I know JB doesn't like it. I prefer you do it by calendar day. It makes life a lot easier all the way around. But hey, absolutely, by regulation, you can certainly file by a transaction serial number.
Yeah, and the ATF's concern, first of all, they're going to be upset because it's really a real hassle to do their inspection, comparing forms against the A&D book. Just in sequence. But the bottom line is this: as long as you have a logical process to retrieve documents in the situation where a trace is involved, and you can explain that to the ATF inspector, that's your system. You know how to do it. You can do it quickly. To JC's point, you should be fine.
Yeah.
The contractors doing the traces can be anywhere. That's correct. They work from home. I had one call me at 10:30 p.m. on a Sunday night. She indicated she was based on the West Coast. Email paperwork came the next day from a different contractor.
Jeez. Well, there's the answer to the question on the trace request. But the examiners that are contractors should also know your hours of business. So you can certainly let those questions go to your voicemail. Just make sure you're responding within 24 hours.
Yeah. And the ATF has told us you are not responsible to respond to traces on your days off, or when you're closed for inclement weather, natural disasters, that type of thing. Just you must make sure your business hours are updated with the tracing center. Yep. If a customer self-identifies as a prohibited person because of a misunderstanding the question, are they allowed to correct their answer, initial and date it, and can we continue with the transaction? Yes. Anytime, the key here is that they misunderstood the question, and this happens very frequently. There's certain words and certain, they don't know what adjudication means. They don't understand the honorable versus dishonorable discharge from the military. The answer is, if they want to change their response prior to the transfer, prior to the background check, and that's where you would be changing it. Obviously, you can't do a background check with NICS or the states. If they answered yes to a prohibited question, that's illegal, not allowed. They can change their question anytime. Just make sure they clearly initial and date it, and make sure you are qualifying a sale. Make sure you believe the authenticity behind the change. Not that they just want to buy a gun, but they truly did not understand the question and made an honest error. Okay. And they do not need to make a copy of that if it's all corrected before the transfer is completed, obviously. I do mean for NICS, I have the NTNs, but I have not printed out the reports. So that's
you're not required to print out that search history query report at all. That's just something that we're telling you to go ahead and print off as a best practice for you to keep track of things. And that way you can prove that if by chance you actually left off a number or character in an NTN number, that you have the ability to prove that you did a background check or you transpose to numbers or letters or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And in the FFLs where you have a lot of transfers or a lot of delays, where you have somebody every morning going in and checking the next status report, and let's say you have 10 people on delay and you're going to have somebody assigned to update the record, pull the 4473s that have been proceeded, pull those that have been denied. We have had, unfortunately, FFLs revoked because their person who did this task every morning mixed up who was delayed and proceeded and denied. And they accidentally transferred guns to denied folks on maybe once or twice. And they got the guns back and they called us, we figured it out and we updated all the records. But because it happened, it was a completed transfer to a prohibited person, seriously unfortunate. And that FFL, a couple of them now have gotten revoked because of that. So printing that next status report is just a good safety blanket in our teaching. Can we use a lifetime hunting license as supplementary ID because they do not have an expiration date?
Sure, it's valid.
Yep.
It's valid for the life of the license or the life of the holder. So yeah, it's absolutely. Yeah, you have older gentlemen that once you reach a certain age in certain states, it becomes a lifetime. Some states actually have lifetime for disabled veterans and things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and today we're getting a lot of questions about if I have an ID from an elderly person who has no expiration date on their driver's license, what do I put in box 26A for expiration date? And the answer is you can leave it blank.
Yeah.
If you leave it blank, you're going to have to put a big giant note in box 32. And because this is very new to not only the ATF, but we see it more and more. It's new to the motor vehicle departments around the country. Some states are doing it, some are not. And they're doing it to save money on reissuing licenses to people who really don't need a new license at age 75. But they're going ahead and leaving that blank or putting none or putting indefinite. The different states are doing different things. So if you have none, I mean, if you have no expiration date, my recommendation is write NONE and put a note in there and maybe keep a copy of that ID for reference in case this question comes up down the road during an inspection. Again, file it separately, but that is the only, we don't have any firm direction from the ATF except to list the expiration ID, if any. That's how the language reads.
If any. Yep.
If any. So don't get dinged, have your proof that there was no expiration date on the driver's license. All right. In New Jersey, here you go, JC.
Yeah.
With the current ability for CCWs, will they be permitted to be exempt from the 7-day delay period?
All right. So this is New Jersey only. Everybody, that's the caveat to this question. This is New Jersey only. So if you're not a dealer in New Jersey, you don't need to worry about it, because if you're not a dealer in New Jersey, you can't transfer a firearm to somebody anyway if they're a New Jersey resident. All right. So New Jersey prohibits the delivery of a handgun to any person unless the person possesses a valid permit to purchase a handgun and at least 7 days have elapsed since the date of application for a permit. Since each permit to purchase a handgun is valid for only one handgun purchase, it effectively creates a 7-day waiting period for all handgun sales. Waiting period to obtain that permit can be as long as 30 days, 45 days for non-residents while the permit application is processed. So just keep that in mind. All right. That's for handguns only. New Jersey does not have a waiting period for long guns. So. No. And to answer the question, no, they won't be exempt.
Right. And again, guys, if you don't know the state laws of the other state that of someone standing in front of you, make sure you call us or do your online research. Another good example is Florida. You cannot transfer a firearm to anyone from Florida until they receive an approval from NICS or FDL, a long gun. So it's not a 3-day wait or 10-day wait. It's a forever wait. And again, those expire after 30 days.
And two other caveats to New Jersey. I know you guys are going through this right now, along with New York, because of the Supreme Court ruling. Just so you understand, number one, it's unknown whether or not how they're going to handle the whole CCW thing. I know they've got some emergency procedures in place, but keep in mind, as it relates to exemptions, that's an agreement between the state and NICS. And the state or local law enforcement agency that issues those permits where an exemption is allowed have to follow very specific rules. So keep that in mind. There has to be an agreement. And I very seriously doubt that the state of New Jersey is going to go above and beyond for people's Second Amendment rights.
Right. We process the gun transfers at iTouch machines, which where the form is checked twice before taken up to the register for a cashier to check them out. The person doing the 4473 signs the form. Should the cashier, so I guess that's an employee doing the 4473, but the customer signs the form, should the cashier be signing lines 34, 35, 36?
No, it's whoever's actually involved in the transfer, the transaction transfer. Don't look at it, the financial aspect of it. Look at whoever's doing the actual physical transfer of that firearm.
Yeah, so it's a person who's checking the ID, making sure the background check is accurate and complete and authorized, and handing that specific gun to the customer. So I am, kind of envisioning the salesman or salesperson doing that, doing all of that process, walking that customer up to a register, and the cashier just taking the money. So to JC's point, it should stay with the salesperson.
Yeah, if you're one of those FFLs that does 2 or 3 checks before that firearm is actually transferred to the customer, physically handed over to the customer, it's not the second or third person that's doing it. It's the person that was engaged, interacting with the customer.
Okay, I can't seem to locate the document to prepare for an inspection on your website that you mentioned. Just send us an email. We'll send it directly to you. info@fflconsultants.com, info@fflconsultants.com. That's our email address. Send a request. We'll get that right out to you. A client brings a firearm to me to mail to another FFL for repairs. So I load this into my repair book, then ship it and dispose with that FFL. Then when the repair is complete, I bring it back into my repair book and then issue to the client. Is this process correct? And what additional notes or documentation, if any, do I need?
Absolutely, 100%. You
Yep.
bring it in as a warranty item. You can make a little note that it's a warranty or gunsmithing or whatever the case may be, or put it in a gunsmithing logbook. You'll receive it from that customer. That's their name and address. You'll dispose of it to whatever FFL you're sending it to for the repair. You want to make sure that FFL is valid, of course. When you receive it back, you're going to acquire it back from whoever that FFL was that sent it to you. And then you're going to dispose of it back to the customer. No background check is required. None of that. No 4473. The reason why you document the name and address is so that you can verify and validate that this individual is the same person that you acquired it from. You're giving the gun back to its original owner. As far as additional paperwork, the only thing I recommend, and JB, I'm sure you do too, is, have some sort of PO or warranty ticket or service ticket or something like that to show what was going on with the firearm in case the ATF challenges you on it. It's very rare, but just be aware of that.
And use the story box 32, write in big letters, repaired gun returned to same customer. Yep. I'm sorry. No, that's on a 4473, so that wouldn't apply. Yeah, but write it in your bound book. Make sure it's clear.
Make that notation. Do a memo for record, or keep a ticket, service ticket.
There you go. I'm in North Alabama. Lucky you. Been there. Our ATF area supervisor, I will leave him anonymous here, is hosting a FFL seminar on 8/31. It appears all local FFLs have been invited. How normal is this?
Well, we actually run around the country all year long. Every field division does what's called they get budgeted to do 2 to 3 FFL seminars, educational events per field division. It's not unusual at all. And atypically, we're out doing these as well right with the ATF. So not unusual at all. We recommend that you attend it. Absolutely. Receive some education, get some clarity. And if they confuse you, just give us a call and we'll unconfuse you.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of these going on in the last couple of months. JC, myself, and we went out with ATF and Nix and did we did 18 or 20 of these.
Yeah.
If you attended them,
30.
yeah, across the country. But now the ATF smaller offices are trying to reach out because of all the new regulations, actually trying to put the best foot forward and trying to not revoke your license, trying to almost give you a warning. These are they will be honest with you. They'll tell you these are the things we're revoking licenses on. So we see that as a good faith attempt to help you out. So it's not any deceitful reason for them doing this, taking names. So go ahead.
And just so you're aware, I mean, their fiscal year ends the end of September. So they're required to fulfill certain responsibilities, and that includes doing outreach and training seminars. So they've got some budget dollars for this that they need to spend. And that's why they're trying to kick them out and get them done before the end of September.
Yep. Just a couple more questions, guys. We've only gotten phone calls for traces, never email or fax. Is that normal?
Yeah, absolutely. If you pick up the phone, they're going to call you.
Yeah.
So if they don't get a hold of you, then they'll try email, they'll try fax, they'll try to send you a certified letter, but atypically you're going to get a phone call because they're trying to get an answer right away.
Yeah. ATF shows up for inspection and the owner is not there that day, just a temp worker, no inspection, or what happens?
Well, you're the responsible person. I don't understand what temp worker is, but basically here's the deal. I mean, you can certainly tell your employees if the ATF walks in to have the IOI, whoever's showing up from the ATF, to call you, and you can certainly make a request that, hey, I'm tied up. That doesn't mean they won't get started. But in those situations, you can make a request to hold off until you actually are back. Say you're on vacation or something like that. We actually had an FFL that was going in for surgery that made the request of ATF, and ATF is accommodating atypically. You just have to explain to the ATF that the employee that's there isn't going to be able to answer the questions that they, as the ATF during inspection, will have. And you would just kindly ask that they wait until you return. Now, keep in mind, they're not going to come back 6 months later. If you're still operating the business, they want to get that inspection done. So it just has to be extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, they will have a concern though, depending on what you tell them, whether or not somebody qualified and understanding and educated is actually running a firearms business. So
yeah,
you got to walk that line slowly. Yeah.
Yep. Carefully.
Yep. Where exactly do I find a new NSSF A&D book? On their website? I cannot locate it. Is it available for non-members?
It is in their store, or it should be in their store. We'll get back to you on that. Why don't you just go ahead and email us at info@fflconsultants.com. We'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, I know we gave them recommendations. Everyone gave recommendations for the updating of the book itself. I'm not sure they're printed and available yet.
Yeah. But, yeah, I just reviewed it for them, I don't know, a week ago. So okay. I know that it's been submitted for print. So
yep. Have you had any instances where the NICS gave a proceed and then calls hour later and changes it to a delay after the firearm has been legally transferred?
Yep. Happens not often, but there have been situations where it happens.
Yeah. And often it gets changed to a denial.
Yep.
And in that case, just make sure you're documenting the operator's name who's calling you from the tracing center on line 28, and all that information about, there's a line down there about receiving a notification from ATF after the transfer is completed that it was changed to a denial. Make sure you put all that information in there. You have not done anything wrong as long as you follow the proper delay dates, if you have them in your state. And what they will ask you for is a copy of the 4473, because now they have to go out and retrieve that firearm. They may ask you to do it. We highly recommend against that. Let them go do it because it was their mistake, their error. You're not responsible for refunding that gun unless you feel good about it and want to do it. But yeah, they'll go out and retrieve that firearm. So when you send that 4473 over to them, again, triple check it before you send it over. Make sure it's correct and accurate. JC was at a Denver seminar this year with the ATF and was fantastic, and every FFL should attend.
Well, thanks for that one. Who was that? Kevin? Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Great seeing you out at that seminar.
That was Kevin. Last one, guys.
I've had the opportunity to do 4 of them for Denver this year. It's been crazy. So
yeah. Last question we have. If you got any more, please type it in. For clarification, is the country or countries of manufacture, if imported, block required for FFLs that only do straight retail sales?
If you're not a manufacturer or importer, no, it is not required. That is required for manufacturers and importers only.
Cool.
So if you're not a
Wow,
type
guys.
7 or a type 8, nope,
Yep,
not
yep.
required.
Yeah. Well, listen, we are way over, but we appreciate everyone hanging on. We will go up. Let's see, one more question. My IOI requires the above info. Oh, Matt, keep typing that question so we can answer it. But we will send the video link. We will send a PDF document link so you guys can share this with your team if you just want to review it, review some slides. And we'll even throw in the Biden inspection guide link right in that email. That'll be the end of the week, probably Friday morning-ish. We'll send everyone registered for this event. Thank you very much. We'll send that information out to you. Here's that last question. My IOI requires the above info. She requires country of origin on my 4473s.
No.
That's the secret manual. What do you call it?
Yeah,
JC?
that's the code of IOI regulations.
Yeah.
That is non-existent. If there's not a regulation that requires it, be nice about it, be diplomatic. Just ask your IOI to provide it to you in writing and reference the regulation. Just say, just for clarity, I just need to reference the regulation. Can you tell me where that is? So
yeah,
but get it in writing. Get it in writing from your IOI, and then reach out to us at info@fflconsultants.com. We have a direct path to the leadership at the ATF. So we can reach out to the ATF and have a conversation about it and see what the heck is going on. And we can leave you anonymous. That's the key when it comes to this kind of stuff. When we contact the ATF on your behalf, we don't mention your name. We just say we have a client that has this issue and get clarification in writing. So that way we provide it to you. And when your IOI shows up and says you have to do this, you can say, well, ATF headquarters told me I didn't. So you need to talk to them.
And we provide that written documentation to you for your records so you don't get in trouble down the road. Yeah. IOIs hate us.
Yeah.
Revisiting the importer information, typo 2 FFL, do I need to include this on 4473 and our A&D book?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If a firearm's been imported, you are required to, remember, it says manufacturer and importer, if any. That if any. So if there's an importer on that firearm, you are required to document the manufacturer and the importer of that firearm. And as a part of these rulings that have come down, manufacturers and importers are now required to mark that information in a conspicuous place on the firearm frame or receiver. So that's obviously, we have a lot of firearms in inventory right now, but as time goes on and we turn that inventory, any new firearms are going to have the information in the correct spot, so you don't have to go searching for it like we do on a number of the inspections we do.
Yeah, Josh, I'll be sure, because you were valiant enough to ask that, I'll also include a link to that. That's also available on our website. I'll include a link to that download training guide that we have for properly listing manufacturer and importer. I'll do that for you. JC, lastly, do you have where's our September? Guys, we are doing this again in September. Just trying to find a date.
When is it? It is.
It's the.
When is it? Did we not put it on the calendar?
I
No
don't.
way.
I don't have it on this calendar. We will surely include that in our invite to you guys at the end of the week.
I could have swore we decided on a date already.
Yep, towards the end of September. Okay.
Yeah. It will be towards the end of September.
Yeah.
Hey, one other tidbit of information for y'all that stuck around for the very end here. We really appreciate you joining us today. I know a lot of you are dropping off. You got business to get to. One other thing I wanted to mention to you is we are starting to recommend to FFLs that you maintain something called an ATF communications log. And this can be something as simple as a spiral notebook that you get from a Walmart or a Walgreens or any of those other Target type stores. Just put on the front of it, ATF communications log. anything you're told by an ATF IOI, anything you receive as far as, information from the ATF, make sure you're logging it with a date and time, who told you, what they told you, all of that. If you go to training, make sure you're logging that. This is crucial and very helpful to us in the event that you suffer adverse action by the ATF, or God forbid you receive that notification of revocation. We have some ammunition that we can provide to the ATF during your hearing to let them know, hey, look, this FFL takes compliance very seriously, and these are all the things they do to remain compliant, to educate themselves, to train themselves. It's very, very helpful to us. This is something, as of this whole zero tolerance thing, that we're recommending to FFLs to do, to keep track of it. You're not going to remember all the interactions that you've had with the ATF. So we want to help you with that, and just keep kind of a journal and notes of all those interactions and all those questions. And by all means, in that communications log, you can put down that on August 29th of 2022, you attended FFL Consultants Ask Us Anything and received training on the following items. That helps us. All right. So keep in mind that's something really, really good that you can start doing today to help you keep better track of all your compliance efforts.
That's it. Well, guys, have a great Labor Day weekend. We very much enjoyed your questions. Thank you so much for participating, and we'll see you all next month. And keep in touch if you need any support.
Take care, everybody. Have a great week.